Okay, so what I'm gonna do is we're gonna go through the brief story of how I became an anarchist. So we'll get a few things out of the way right off the bat and just briefly describe what anarchy is. And it's just a word that means no rulers, an being the absence of, and archon being the word ruler. And so that's all it means. It's not chaos, it's not death and mayhem like people believe it is. It's just a word. But people believe that that word and the absence of rulership would be chaos, death, and mayhem, which is ironic for obvious reasons that most people don't see. However, this is just going to be the story of how I became an anarchist. And I think understanding this story will help me understand my own head and also help other people understand that these are things that people experience. These are things that probably a lot of people experience and can't really wrap their head around, which I wasn't able to at first either. So, the analogy I want to make with this is that saying that I became an anarchist would be like saying that a sponge became absorbent. It just is that way. And the more water that's poured on it, the more it absorbs, and it just always was that way. So I didn't become an anarchist, quote unquote. I was just that way and found more information that informed me on what anarchy really is and why it's important to understand the distinction. A lot of this came from mainly from being in school, I think, where I was just like shuffled around and told what to do and instinctively understood that there wasn't anything wrong with the things I wanted to do for myself, but I was always just shuffled around and told what to do and basically lectured at for being disruptive. And then people wondered why I got angry. Um, so I didn't really realize when I was in school that I was a part of a Pavlovian conditioning program designed to indoctrinate people into authoritarianism. But now that I've done a little bit more homework on that, I understand that that's what the public education system is designed for and what its intended purpose is. And so I always kind of wondered why I had to participate, and so tried to participate as little as possible. I just wanted to go to the library and be left alone and do my own thing. And I really didn't understand what was so wrong about that, but apparently not participating or being a good mindless zombie is not acceptable in public school systems, which means that you have some kind of disorder or something. Um, so mostly it came around, like I said, the water on the sponge came around from reading and learning, but it's not what made me an anarchist. I was just, like I said, I was just that way. That's just the way that I was. And so going through all of that Pavlovian conditioning of being told that authority creates order and all of this nonsense that you're told is the way, you'll hear that a lot, the way things are and the only way it can be. And when I started to understand a little bit more about anarchy, I was, I think, in 10th grade in study hall, and I was just thinking about these concepts and wondering why this, like, weird essence thing was there. And I couldn't really wrap my head around it until later when I did more reading. But I just thought to myself, and I remember it really clearly too, that any intelligent civilization capable of critical thinking would never even form the concept of a government, let alone the idea of the validity of telling other people what to do with their own choices in their own lives. Ironic place to come up with that notion when that's basically what you're being conditioned to do, and it does the opposite. And I think it does the opposite for a lot of people that go through that, which you have no choice, which is idiotic in and of itself, that you are basically told, like, lectured about freedom in a place where you have no freedom. I'm going to make a separate video about that, I think. But just looking through my notes, and I think it's one of those things where I didn't understand it in my own head, and then trying to explain that to all of these other people that are just like, they just accept it. And I thought it was weird. I remember this like voting participation thing, and it was like basically required that you participate, and it's like, I don't believe in any of this. I don't know why I'm being forced to participate in this. And I think most people just go along with it because they don't really know any better. Like, they don't know that you can vote whichever way you want. You're still being ruled over by someone, and you don't have, like, I thought it was weird that people basically fundamentally don't believe that they have the right to make their own choices about their own actions, or they don't believe that they have any self-control and that they need someone to control them, which is just, like, doesn't make sense how that, like, putting your control of yourself out to some other entity fixes anything. It doesn't, and you can see that as the world plunges into more and more wonderful chaos. I think it, like, not understanding stuff about anarchy comes from the idea that people don't really know where chaos comes from, and I feel like I instinctively knew where chaos came from because the teachers would cause it. I would just be drawing or doodling or whatever, and then they would stop the whole show that they were conducting to single me out for being quote-unquote disruptive when all I was doing was pretending erasers were people. So it's a really bizarre thing when I think about it now, but I didn't realize that I was in that system at the time. I didn't realize that you're just beat over the head with the idea that you're gonna be beat over the head later. But I just thought it was weird the way people think and act when they're in these systems, and it just always felt wrong. It always felt weird and creepy, where it's just like, oh, we all just do this? That's stupid and strange. I don't understand how this solves anything. I don't understand what the function of this is. And so that instinct of not understanding it, like, propelled me towards more of the books and material that helped me inform that and put it into something that was more logical, where now I can explain the idea and be like, yeah, having someone in charge doesn't create less chaos. It makes actually the potential for chaos increase exponentially. And so if everyone just, like, learned about themselves and took the initiative to not get in anyone else's way, that would create peace and harmony. And doing the opposite of that, where you have quote-unquote leaders telling people what to do, just increases the potential of chaos by, like, a millionfold. And it also never addresses the question of how that constitutes a solution. It's like, you don't have control over yourself, so you're going to select someone to do that for you, but you have no real way of knowing whether they're any better than you are, so what does that solve? But so the quest for knowledge and not understanding this really fluffy thing that was floating around in my head, and where I realized I'm different from other people. I'm very, very dramatically different from other people. And that was kind of the propellant that got me into realizing that I was an anarchist, because I didn't have a word for it at the time, and just all of the instinctive aspects of it were so simple to me, it didn't make sense at all why other people were the way that they were, and why they thought that having some master controlling everything, and like that was the source of all of this normal stuff that happened. They thought that that person in charge is the reason why XYZ thing happened, and it's like, no, that XYZ thing would have happened anyway. Deer don't have a government, and they still have trails and roads, so I don't know where people get off. But that's kind of the brief history of that, for me at least. And I hope that understanding something like this and just knowing that there are other people that are like that is important, because if I had known that there were other people like that and had somebody really go through it with me and explain it, and also explain that there's the reason for that is XYZ thing, where it's all a bunch of mythology that there's someone in charge and that creates order in the world. But it would have been nice to have that, but I came up with the idea all on my own. I just didn't know what it was called at the time. And I think it really was mostly school. It was mostly school that brought it on. So they achieved the totally opposite aim of what their intended goal was. So I think that's a good feather in your cap if you've made it all the way through your full indoctrination, and have still come out the other side thinking that people telling other people what to do is an invalid way of operating a civilization. So I hope that this can be informative for other people that might have either have done or are currently in the process of having their brain stripped out of their head and replaced with a bunch of fluffy authoritarian mythology. So I think that's about all I have for that, because I don't think there's much more I can say about how that happened. Like I said, it's just a sponge. It was just a sponge and absorbed a whole bunch of the ideas that were already important. It's kind of like you don't know that a plant can get to a certain size until the plant has all the nutrients that it needs. And that's another good analogy, that if you are a withering, dying plant getting bludgeoned to death with authoritarian nonsense, then hopefully this video can be something that you can look at and be like, hey, I'm not alone. There's other people that think the same thing as me, and it's not about like being someone who's like being an anarchist isn't chaos and mayhem and just death all over the place. That's the total opposite of that, and that's kind of the point. And so, yeah, you're not alone in that. And there are other people that are basically mentally default to that, where it's like, no, wait, I make my own choices, I'm my own person, and all of the chaos and mayhem is actually caused by that thing that you believe, not what I believe. So I hope this helps you out if that's a place in your mind that you're stuck at or going through. And it was really interesting for me to kind of follow that up. And there's a whole bunch of resources now that I can recommend, and I'll probably put some links down below for you to hop on board with and get into doing a little bit of the reading that can help you kind of get out of that mental state if you are in it, or help you nourish yourself to become bigger and better in your understanding of who and what you naturally are. So that's all I have for this before I go rambling more, which I'd rather not do. Alright, thanks.